Welcome to the SPS Digital Learning Hour.
Brought to you by the Digital Learning and Assessment Department.
We're coming to you from a conference room in Central Office, bringing you the latest news in the Springfield Public Schools in regards to technology, along with inspiring interviews from teachers who are using technology in the classroom.
We'll also inform you of the latest updates, practices, and news as it pertains to our district. Whether you are new to using technology in the classroom or are a seasoned vet, we are here to help.
For this week's interview of the week, it is actually, instead of hot take, it is our entire interview with Paul Foster, who is our boss's boss. Suzanne, do you have anything you want to say before we get into listening?
No, just I think it's really worth the time. Hopefully you're on your way to a beautiful vacation or a nice sunny afternoon. It's a great interview. I think you'll enjoy it. And if you have any questions afterwards, please feel free to let us know.
I'm Paul Foster. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the Springfield Schools, and we're in my office.
Just for a recap for folks, what are some of the highlights of this year from your point of view?
We've had a number of exciting developments this year. One of them is the movement forward with our take-home initiative. We had, I think, a dozen schools sending laptops home with students this year, and upwards of 2,500 students, I believe, participating in taking a laptop home every night, being able to do their homework, being able to practice what they're learning in the evening. So that's been one of the exciting developments, and I think we're looking for more of that and more expansion of that next year. We've seen a successful administration of access testing and MCAS testing online. Kids are becoming more and more accustomed to taking their tests online and being able to navigate through the online test platforms, use the online tools like online calculators and online protractors, and so we've seen a lot of success there. We've also seen a lot of developments in the area of professional development for our staff around We Learn and around the use of technology in the classroom. It's particularly gratifying to see teachers teaching each other, see teachers sharing what they're learning, and we've seen that in a lot of places. We've had our Saturday We Learn Symposium. We had one in the fall where teachers are basically leading workshops for their colleagues, and then a number of schools participated in We Learn Symposia on the November, January, or March PD Day, where 2 or 3 schools all got together in one building. And just like the We Learn Symposiums we've always done on Saturdays, it gave teachers a chance to share what they're learning, what they're trying, what they're experimenting with, how that's gone, how they revised it based on how it's gone. Even as our students have been taking laptops home, we've been making efforts to try to make internet access available to them in ways that it hasn't always been. That's included encouraging families to take advantage of Comcast's Internet Essentials program, which provides internet access for $9.95 a month for every family in the Springfield schools. We've also had some innovative work done around providing Wi-Fi hotspots that are connecting through cellular networks and letting kids take those home along with their laptops. We were part of a Sprint 1 Million program where Sprint donated more than 700 hotspots to our high school students and allowed those students to have access when they're at home, when they wouldn't have otherwise. So being in schools this year, it's been incredibly helpful and fun to see just what teachers are trying, to see teachers trying new things, to walk into an elementary classroom and see students are all working on the same assignment, but some of them are doing it in Scratch, some of them are doing it in PowerPoint, some of them are doing it on a website, and seeing students exercising choice in how they demonstrate their learning, which has always been one of the goals of We Learn. And I think increasingly, we've always talked about We Learn moving from experimenting to expecting and really getting to implementation where, in every classroom in the district, teachers are trying new things. And we're probably not there yet. We're probably not to every teacher trying new things on a regular basis, but I think we are seeing a growing culture of innovation where folks are talking to each other and thinking about, not just with technology, but just thinking about how can they do teaching and learning in a way that is different and more accessible for all their students.
So one of the things this year that has been very interesting to hear buzzed about in the district is this idea of something called CS for All. Could you explain that to us and what has gone on this year? And with that, can you talk about what's coming next year with it?
So Computer Science for All is a national initiative. It actually started under the Obama administration. And CS stands for computer science. And CS for All is very explicitly saying we want all students really around the country to have the opportunity to learn computer science and computational thinking skills, as well as just how to think. You know, computational thinking sounds big and scary. It's really talking about a systematic approach to problem solving, where you're taking a problem and you're breaking it apart into its components and, you know, solving each part one at a time so that you can kind of put that all together. And, you know, we've talked a lot as a district about what do we mean when we say computer science. People think of coding, and certainly much of computer science is about code. But really, I think what we're talking about in Springfield is the use of technology to solve problems in the world and making sure that our students are the students who are capable of doing that. So over the course of the last year, one of the things that's looked like had 3 curriculum or lesson design teams in kindergarten, 3rd, and 7th grade. And those are just teams of 7 or 8 teachers who have been meeting all year long. They've been looking at the state's digital literacy and computer science standards. They've been thinking about where and when would that fit into the school year? Where and when would I teach that? Could I teach that computer science standards when I'm teaching English or when I'm teaching math or science or social studies? And then having done that work, they're developing and have developed, I should say, model lessons to try. They've piloted those lessons. They are refining those lessons based on the experience of piloting them. And I think that's been a good experience for them to sort of demystify what is computer science and begin to think about what are we going to do in Springfield to make sure that all 25,500 children in the Springfield Public Schools from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade are getting training and education in computer science and computational thinking. I think I'm not going to get the statistic right off the top of my head, but something on the order of 60% of jobs in the future will require computer science and computational thinking skills of one form or another. And, you know I said CS for All is a nationwide initiative, but my goal is to make sure we're ahead of the rest of the nation and ahead of the rest of the state of Massachusetts in making sure that our kids are getting those skills. And we want them getting them with us in our classrooms. We also, I should say, so you asked me about going forward. And so as we go into the 2018-2019 school year, we're pretty excited. A lot of the work we've done so far on computer science education has been funded by a grant from the National Science Foundation to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And we've applied for a 4-year grant for, I think, a couple $1 million from the National Science Foundation to really expand this work. We're going to hear about that probably in September. And if we are awarded that grant, what we'll use that money to do is expand this lesson design work so that we, over the course of 4 years, are developing something between 16 and 24 computer science and computational thinking lessons in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and then rolling out those lessons to every kindergarten through 5th grade teacher in the district so that we know that every elementary student in Springfield is getting instruction in computer science from kindergarten all the way to 5th. And I think once we've done that work in elementary, we're just going to build on that. We'll, start adding lessons and content in middle school. And certainly we'll do the same in high school where, really in elementary and middle, we want to see computer science and computational thinking instruction happening in, lots of classrooms, happening in English class, happening in math class, happening in science and social studies. When you get to high school, we want to see pathways. We want to see students able to take coding classes, programming classes, so that they're, have that skill before they even leave high school.
So just to clarify, CS for All is not just for high school students. I've heard you mention a couple of times that it is for students from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. How would you address someone who just doesn't understand why an elementary school teacher needs to teach computer science?
Yeah, I think part of the answer to that is really at the heart of why there's a CS for All initiative nationally. One of the things I think is just a known fact in the field of computer science is that it's largely dominated by people who look like me, which for those of you listening, I happen to be a white guy. And so part of the explicit purpose of CS for All, both nationally and in Springfield, is to increase the diversity of people who have the skills to enter those computer science and more broadly STEM fields. But also, as I said earlier, there's just a reality that all of our kids are going to need some level of computer science and computational thinking. And if we don't provide that, it's not clear. We're going to be setting our kids back and putting them at a disadvantage when they leave us. So going back to your question about how do you convince an elementary school teacher that they have to teach computer science, right? And one of the dominant, we start talking about computer science with our teachers, I think there's a sort of an anxiety, right? It sounds like, okay, you want me to be a coder, but, I'm trying to teach first graders. And I think the answer is, by the time you get to high school and to some degree even middle school, kids have already made some decisions in their own minds about whether they're good at certain things. And so kids are making decisions even as elementary school children about whether they're good at math, whether they're good at science, or whether they're good at or interested in computer science and computational thinking. So the reality is, if we waited until middle school or high school to focus our computer science efforts, what would end up happening is we would probably actually perpetuate the problem. And it'll be mostly both boys and mostly students who are white who would be opting to take elective courses in middle school or high school in computer science because other students would have made a decision really without ever having had much exposure to computer science and computational thinking that, oh, that's not for me, or, oh, I'm not good at that. And so I think we actually focused our efforts, as I mentioned, the National Science Foundation grant, we focused our efforts on elementary. Now, we've certainly done work at the high schools, and our high schools are offering courses called like Exploring Computer Science and AP Computer Science Principles. Those courses exist in all of our high schools, but partly why we're focused at elementary is to make sure that all of our students have exposure so that when we get to high school, it's not just the same students who always pick those classes who are opting in to take computer science or to take coding.
So is it safe to say that computer science is similar to just adding another subject to that core base? You have reading, you have math, you have science, and now you'll have computer science. So it's not to say that every student is going to be a coder as they graduate, but we want to expose them to the possibilities.
Absolutely. I think, whether or not computer science at the elementary will be its own course, I think it's likely to be embedded within the other content areas, but it is certainly its own content. And it's a content that every student needs, just like they need math, just like they need English. I mean, this is a little bit cliche, but you sometimes hear people say that computer science is a new literacy. And I would certainly agree that it is a fundamental skill and knowledge that our students are going to need in the same way that they need English, math, science, and social studies. So how that's delivered, it certainly can be delivered in the context of other content areas. And one of the things we wrestle with is there's only so much time in a school day. So going to an elementary teacher and saying, well, now I want you to spend 60 minutes on computer science. That's probably not what this is going to look like. It's probably going to look like, when you're doing an English lesson or you're doing a math lesson, you can bring computer science into that.
What kind of efforts are being made to incorporate those state standards beyond just having a group of CS for All lessons for each grade? Are there things that are happening in the classrooms now where maybe teachers don't know that they're actually teaching the standards?
Certainly, there's some of that. I mean, certainly, and I mentioned their digital literacy and computer science standards. Many of the digital literacy standards are happening now. I mean, these are standards about how to be safe online. Much of that's already being taught in our health classes. There are standards about how to cite work, how to make sure you're when you do a research project and you're writing something up, how to cite your sources. Those exist in both our English language arts standards as well as in the digital literacy standards. So some of this content's already being taught. And I think even in subtle ways, there are ways that as folks are teaching other subjects, their students are learning computer science or computational thinking. One of my favorite examples in the digital literacy and computer science standards, the standards are nicely structured because they articulate a standard which sounds big and scary. And they give an example of what that means. And so one of the kindergarten through second grade standards is that students need to be able to articulate an algorithm. Well, again, it sounds big and scary, but knowing that an algorithm is just a sequence of steps to solve a problem, the standards actually articulate the example. It says right in parentheses after that standard, for example, students need to be able to articulate the steps involved in making a sandwich. Right. And so it's really, like I said at the beginning, computer science is about problem solving and about not only being able to solve a problem, being able to figure out what is the right sequence of steps in order to solve that problem. A lot of that kind of thing, if we're doing, creative teaching and learning and doing, research projects and project-based learning, a lot of that kind of, learning how to solve a problem in a step-by-step way is happening already.
So one of the things that we hear often, and I think we even addressed it last year when we talked, was this idea that technology changes in this district so fast. Why should I adopt yada, 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 whether it's Brightspace or Dino this year, which has been very popular with a number of teachers. Like with that thought of the teachers who don't adopt it are like, oh, it's something new's coming next year or something new's coming in 2 years. So why do I do this now? I start the question that way because there's a lot of changes happening for next year. You want to talk about some of those changes?
Sure. I think one of the things that's challenging, but also, I suppose, enjoyable about my role and the role of the IT department broadly is that we have to figure out the right balance between innovation and, folks' ability to adapt, flex, change, learn new things. And you're exactly right. I think there is certainly and in education generally, there is constant change. We're always dealing with the next either mandate or push, whether it's a push from the federal government or state government or just a movement in the culture that, we need to respond to. But there's always this pressure to change. And I think there is a temptation to just, especially for folks that, been in the work for a long time to feel like, well, this is just the next thing. And this will go away like all the 12 other things that went away. And I think one of the things we need to make sure we do is establish some consistency to the extent possible. But that is certainly challenging, as you said, in the context of technology, because just the minute you make an investment in technology and buy what is the next best thing, within days, weeks, or a year, there's a new next best thing. And the thing that you bought is no longer the next best thing. It's the last best thing. And so, as I started, that one of our challenges is to figure out what is that balance of not pushing more change than people can handle, with not holding back what's possible for students. And so, as you said, we're making a lot of changes. I'll talk a little about them and a little about the why. So we have been using Brightspace as our learning management system for 3 years now. We actually had it in the district for 4, but really it's been heavily used for the last 3 years. And just to be clear about what I mean by a learning management system, it's our online classroom. It's a place where teachers and students are interacting and engaging with content and with each other. And there's, an online class there's a page, I should say, and multiple pages for every class in the district. And we've done all our assessments online in Brightspace. And over the last couple of years, one of the things we've heard from teachers is there's things about it they don't like. There's things that don't work the way that they would like it to. Within the assessment platform, it doesn't do the kind of assessment or testing items that you find on the next generation MCAS that our kids are taking. Sometimes managing multiple classes has proven challenging for our teachers. So, for example, if a teacher wants to post an announcement to all 5 of their classes, they have to post it 5 times. And that's proven challenging. We've heard that feedback. And so taking that feedback, knowing the risk of asking people to change, we felt like there was a new next best thing that was going to be good for teachers and students in Springfield. And so for starting next school year, and we're moving from Brightspace towards PowerSchool Unified Classroom. And we're going to take our time so that people don't feel like we're pulling the rug out from under. So all of next school year for all of 2018-2019, students are going to have access to, or students and teachers are going to have access to Brightspace. But also teachers will begin to access and use PowerSchool Unified Classroom. And it addresses many of the concerns that we had with Brightspace. So you can build assessments that look just like an MCAS 2.0. Teachers can post announcements or assignments or discussion boards to one class or multiple classes at one time. And so those are, 2 of the things I spoke about that Brightspace was challenging for, that PowerSchool helps with. One of the other big things is just it's PowerSchool. PowerSchool is what we use as our student information system. It's where teachers are taking attendance and inputting grades. So now instead of logging into one place for attendance and grades and logging into another place for issuing assignments or having students take tests, that's all going to happen in one place with one login. So I think there's a lot of benefit there for our teachers. So that's one big change. And I think certainly for some folks, there's going to be well, wait a minute, we only had Brightspace for 3 years and now you're asking me to learn a whole new system. And I think that's true. We are asking people to do that. And that's challenging. But there's a reality that keeping the same piece of software for, 8, 9, 10 years, sometimes in some cases even 4, 5, or 6 years, if it's not the right software for our teachers and students, it's just not the right decision to keep it for this, just because it's what we know. And so this is a case where when we did that balance of the challenge of everybody having to learn a new system, including me, by the way, versus trying to stick with something that, we might know it, but we also know that there's a number of folks who don't like it. We felt like we needed to make a decision to go with what was going to be better for teachers and kids. There are other examples. So another one, we've been using one platform for managing educator evaluation for, I want to say 4 or 5 years now. We call it Seeds Online, but it's a piece of software called or produced by True North Logic. And we've used it and it's worked well for us. And when we bought it, it was the right product for Springfield at the time. But it's technology. Times change. And there's a product called TeachPoint, which is much easier to use, requires you to click many fewer times to get done what you need to get done. And so we've made a decision that, just like with the change from from Brightspace to Unified Classroom, it was time to make a move. And so just like the other implementation, next year, most teachers and most administrators will continue to use True North Logic, or what people know of as Seeds Online, for their evaluations. But starting in the 1920 school year, everybody's going to be using TeachPoint, which I think, again, there's a learning curve. But once folks get past that learning curve and know how to use the new software, I think folks are going to be really happy with what they find in the new software. And I would say that's true for both PowerSchool Unified Classroom and the move to TeachPoint.
With the new platform that's going to be replacing Seeds, how does that affect my learning plan?
It's a good question. So we've used My Learning Plan for a few years to manage professional development. And it's actually been a good product. It's done what we needed it to do. But we also found that when we made the decision to go to TeachPoint for educator evaluations, that TeachPoint also supports that same task of managing our professional development. And so we have made a decision to go to TeachPoint for managing our PD as well as for managing our evaluations. And it's not really a function of being dissatisfied with My Learning Plan, but it gives us the opportunity to go from 2 pieces of software to 1. And so from a teacher perspective, it's one less place to log in. So you're not logging into My Learning Plan for PD and Seeds Online for your evaluation. You're logging into TeachPoint, where you're doing your evaluation, where you're signing up for PD. Mm-hmm. And so while there wasn't something we were particularly unhappy with My Learning Plan, the opportunity to do all of that in one platform I think is going to be good for administrators and.
So one of the challenges I remember with Brightspace from being a teacher was that you had to be selected for a small number of people were selected for training, and then those people were supposed to go out and train other staff members. So like that train the trainer model, which I know from because I was selected and then I tried to, it was much harder because it was a very fragmented training. Is there going to be any sort of different approach to training everybody in the district?
There is, because we got that wrong. That was a mistake. We trained 300 teachers, I think, in using Brightspace, which was a lot. I mean, and we invested resources in doing that. Obviously, those teachers invested their time, which we appreciated. But the reality is, being a teacher, it's busy, right? You're in class, you're with students all day long. And so training 300 teachers with the expectation that they were going to go back to their school and have the opportunity to train their colleagues, it didn't pan out. And I think in some ways, when you look at our utilization of Brightspace, it reflects that reality. And so building or learning from that lesson, our plan is to train every staff member in the district, not just teachers, paras, administrators, how to use PowerSchool Unified Classroom. And so the way that's going to happen is next November, on the November Professional Development Day, every staff member in every secondary school in the district is going to get trained on Unified Classroom. And next January, on the January PD Day, every staff member in every elementary school in the district is going to get trained on Unified Classroom. And that's, it's exactly as you said. We know that the rollout approach with Brightspace didn't work, and we want to make sure every staff member in the district has had at least a full day learning about Unified Classroom. And and a full day is not going to be enough. I mean, for some teachers, it might be. Some teachers are going to take that full day. They're going to run with it. They're going to go online, and they're going to learn how to do things that maybe we couldn't cover in the training. Other teachers are going to need more, and that's fine. And so we're going to have documentation. We're going to have videos. There already, I should say, are videos out online that just on YouTube. You can look up Power School Unified Classroom and watch videos that have been made by teachers in other school districts about how to write a test or how to post a homework assignment. But we will also, we'll be providing documentation, videos, working sessions where, a teacher's struggling with how to set up a class in the Unified Classroom. Drop into a working session at the PD Center after school one day, and we're going to be there to help. So we're going to try to provide lots of different ways for people to access assistance, but I do think it's incredibly important that we're going to make sure every teacher and every staff member gets that full day of training.
One of the things with Brightspace, and we're going to stick with this topic for right now, is that teachers had to create a lot of their own content for it. I know I spent many hours building out modules, and knowing that there's a whole plethora of stuff on the internet, because a lot of times what I would do is I would find something I like, copy it and paste it in make it all work in Brightspace, basically. Is there any way, or do you know of, with Unified, to have some sort of learning object repository?
There is. So within Unified Classroom, they have what they call the content library, which seems aptly named. And it's a place where we're going to have the opportunity at the district level to load content that we think is helpful for teachers. I think this is an area that's one of my big, maybe I should have known from the beginning, but it's one of my lessons learned as we've talked about We Learn, and we've talked about personalizing and student-centered learning. We've done a lot of training, and we've talked a lot about the pedagogy of personalized and student-centered learning. We've talked a lot about doing more project-based kind of learning and doing more assignments or lessons that end with a student-created product. But as you said, that's hard, right? That takes a lot of time for a teacher to come up with that on their own. And there are good resources online. And so one of the things that the content library in Unified Classroom is going to allow is for the academic team at the district level to identify strong, rich, standards-aligned resources. We'll be able to load them into the content library. And what's nice about the content library is everything that goes in there is then indexed to standards, grade level, content area. So if you're a first grade teacher and you're getting ready to teach a lesson, so you want to do something in social studies, right? You have a social studies unit, and you can identify those standards, you can identify your grade level, identify social studies, and go into that content library and find resources. They could be, and by resources, it could be lessons plans that are sort of fully written out, could be video content, could be any number of things that you can then, those teachers can pull that right into their Unified Classroom course and make it accessible to students. There are a lot of open educational resources out there that are very good. And when I say open ed resources, that means free, which is good. And so I think we are looking alongside the academic department at what open resources we might want to load in the content library. The other thing I should say is that the content library also allows teachers to build their own. And, teachers can add their own content to the content library. And we haven't gotten very far in exploring this yet, but I love the idea of, as teachers load content, maybe there's a vetting process, maybe there isn't, but how do we make content that our own teachers are creating available to other teachers in Springfield? So that if, a teacher in one building has created a really fantastic project-based lesson to teach a particular set of standards, why can't teachers in all the other buildings that are teaching that grade level take advantage of that? So I think the content library will afford that as well. Longer term, as a district, one of the things we just know that our teachers, if we're going to ask teachers to do more digital learning and teachers to personalize, we do need to be providing more and more digital resources. We can't just say to teachers, hey, go Google it and find something, right? So, and teachers do that and it's effective, but that's not fair to just say to all of our teachers, hey, go Google it and figure out something to use. And so long term, we're also moving more towards digital textbooks. This is pending school committee approval, but likely as we go into the next school year, there is going to be a new digital science textbook from kindergarten to 8th grade, and there will be likely new science and math digital textbooks in high school. And I think that's an amazing first step. When you look at what's possible with some of these digital textbooks, I'll give an example of the digital science textbook that we may use next year in high school. the level of interactivity for students and the ability for students to access the content in a way that works for them. So one example, if students are reading through a section of the science textbook and there's a particular academic vocabulary word, they can click that word. It doesn't just pop up a definition. It does pop up a verbal definition of what that word means. It also pops up a video that illustrates it or explains what that word means, as well as an actual illustration that shows what that word means. And so 3 different ways to understand what a particular word means. The other thing this textbook does, if students are struggling readers, we still need them to be able to access science content. With the click of a button, a student can lower the Lexile level of the textbook by 200 points. Now, all of the academic content remains the same, but for students who are behind in reading, they're going to be able to still access their science content. I can go on, but it's translated in Spanish, so you can read the entire science textbook in Spanish or in English, again at the click of a button. And there's really rich resources for teachers. So going back to this issue of, it's not fair to say to teachers, we want more digital learning, we want more personalized learning, without providing the resources for them to bring into their class. And in this science textbook, there are pre-built labs, lab lessons, where a teacher can go in and it says, these are the materials you need. Here's what the teacher does. Here's what the student does. There are assignments, projects, ready-made. And so I think I'm excited that we're going to do more. So make sure, can just say, okay, here's Unified Classroom, go make amazing blended and digital learning happen without giving folks resources. So I think the content library, the ability to load open content, as well as the district's willingness to invest in digital textbooks, I think is going to be huge.
And these textbooks, they will be embedded into UC, or will they be like a separate program? Or
it's a great question, and they won't probably be embedded directly in the content library. But one of the things we're working hard on, and this may or may not be ready for the start of the 2018-19 school year, but we're working hard on it, is some ability for, in technical terms, you would call it single sign-on. But what it really means is you log into one place, and then you can click to anywhere else, and it just lets you in because it knows who you are. And so for these textbooks, I think the goal would be, even if they're not directly embedded in the content library within PowerSchool's Unified Classroom, once you log into Unified Classroom, if you click on that textbook to open it up, it doesn't ask you to log in again, which I think would be hugely beneficial for our students. And teachers will have the ability, if they want to build out their lesson plan within Unified Classroom, to link to particular either lessons, chapters, sections of one of these textbooks. So kids can go right to the appropriate page. It's not exactly a page, but they can go to the particular portion of the digital textbook that the teacher wants them to.
So we love all things technology, Paul, but I want to be sure that everyone listening understands that we're not envisioning a day where students are on a computer all day long, correct?
That is correct. In fact, I think what we said is, what I've said, I guess, is that I'd like to see students using technology every day, but never all day. It's a little bit, what I'd like to see is I'd like to see our students using technology the way I do or you do. I use technology on a daily basis in my work, whether it's writing or emailing, and we want students to use technology when it's the right tool, right? So there's no, for the most part, nobody in our department, even though we're the IT department, spends all of their day looking at their computer. We're talking to each other, we're talking to others, we're talking to schools, we're leading trainings or participating in trainings. And so I think the same would be true for students. It's when it's the right tool for the task. And I would even say we focused a lot on wanting to move towards lessons that ask students to be, you think of it as the upper end of Bloom's taxonomy, but we want students to be creators. Make something, right? Make something that shows you're learning. That never has to be technology. It can be, and there are powerful tools with technology to make a blog or a board or a video, a podcast. But there are posters. You can write a paper. There are any number of things that students can do to demonstrate learning. And so, my answer to that is really, we want students to use it when it's the right tool for the task. And I would even say we've talked about student choice. I think one of the things that's very empowering for students is a choice over both how they learn and how they demonstrate their learning. And I'm happy for students to choose not to use the computer. If a particular student wants to demonstrate their learning by giving a talk, I love it. And we want to embrace that. So It's important because we've made a lot of investments in technology in Springfield, and so it's important that folks know that we are not saying that students should be on a computer all day. And one of the things you hear sometimes, I've not heard this in Springfield, but I think you hear it kind of nationally as there's talk about ed reform. The sort of anxiety that there's some intent to replace teachers with computers. And I just want to say for anybody who listens to this podcast that nothing can be further from the truth. That when we talk about the use of computers in our classroom, we do see the role of our teachers changing from being the person who's always the one who conveys content to our students to being a person who is coaching, supporting, facilitating as our students learn content and our students demonstrate what they're learning. And I actually think when we get there, there's a learning curve and it's hard work. But when we get to that point, I think it's incredibly empowering for teachers to not have to be the person who just conveys everything, but to be able to work individually and in small groups with students as students are figuring out how to take in a new piece of content or a new piece of information. But, it's a shift and it'll take time, but there's no question that you can't hand a kid a computer and expect them to learn. They need a teacher. I think in some ways, one of the reasons we're doing take home is because historically, the way school has operated is teachers convey content during the day, and then they send kids home at night to practice, which is what homework is, right? It's practice. And that doesn't work, necessarily if all of our kids don't have somebody at home who could help them when they struggle with their practice or with their homework. That model doesn't work for them. And so shifting to models where students are taking a laptop home and using their time at home to maybe watch a video or read a digital textbook and start to learn a new piece of content so that when they go in the next day, that they're sitting in the classroom practicing or producing some kind of product that demonstrates what they learned the night before, because we want them to be doing that practice while the teacher's there to help. And so I think that's one of the huge advantages of technology.
So one of the big state and local initiatives in Massachusetts, as we all know, is the transition from MCAS to MCAS 2.0, which is taking the assessment from paper to computer. Can you speak to how that transition is going in the district, what we're doing to really make this monumental shift plausible for our size of a district, for everybody that we have?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot going on to support that shift, and I don't want to minimize it. It's a big deal. I hear from teachers and from principals sometimes about just the concern about students going from paper pencil test. So the issue of it comes up a lot. Students aren't writing enough, so they see a little dialogue box on the test, and they just think, oh, let me fill the dialogue box and then I'm done. Not thinking about, okay, you can write more. Or hearing concerns about students not being comfortable with the online tools, right? There's online calculators, online protractors, thinking about annotating. We, as we should, have spent a lot of time teaching our students how to annotate a text, how to close read a text. And then when kids see that text on the screen, do they know how to use the tools that are built into the test for underlining, highlighting? So that's a big shift. I think we're doing a lot to support that. I mean, at a basic level, just having kids try it. And so I think our team has done a lot to go out to schools and support them to do practice tests, to do infrastructure trials, to make sure everybody in the building knows how the technology works. And, inevitably, when you're using technology, there's going to be things that go wrong. And so making sure that, practicing, and I mean practicing for the students, learning how to use the tools, and I mean practicing for the staff, knowing what to do if a student hits Control-Alt-Delete in the middle of their test and gets blown out of their test session. What does the staff do to respond to that? And so it's going to take time. I think folks did a really good job this year of going through practice tests and trying things. And I think our team's done a lot to support that work. But I think there's more to do. I think the thing that helps the most with student readiness is using computers. I think when a school says to me, what do we do to get our kids ready for the next generation MCAS? I think my response will always be, are you doing teaching and learning with technology? Because if you want kids to be able to demonstrate their learning with technology, they really better be learning with technology.
And can you talk to the tie-in to Unified Classroom as to how we think this is a huge shift in terms of supporting what our students are going to be seeing in MCAS 2.0?
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the decision points in moving from Brace-Based to Unified Classroom is the fact that within Unified Classroom, our teachers as well as our academic team will be able to build both district, school, and classroom assessments that essentially look and feel exactly like the Next Generation MCAS, right down to, the folks who are familiar with the Next Generation MCAS, when students are doing the ELA portion and they're responding to questions about a text, the layout is side by side, where you have a text in the left-hand column, and in the right-hand column you have a series of questions. And Unified Classroom is going to allow us to build assessments that look exactly like that, that also include tools like the online calculator, like an equation editor. So really, my encouragement to all of our schools is, really jump in with Unified Classroom, right? If there's where there's anxiety about are kids ready to take a test online, the response is, are they taking tests online all year long? Because if you're taking a test online in a format like Unified Classroom, where it looks just like a Next Generation MCAS with all the same tools, if you're taking your tests all year long, by the time that you get to the MCAS, that ought to just be normal.
Last question. If a new teacher out there was debating whether to come to Springfield or to go to another town, would you say to them, why should they teach in Springfield?
Well, I would certainly say to that person, come to Springfield. And the why, I think part of it is the mission of Springfield. We are serving a population of students through no fault of their own who are walking into our schools with extra challenges. And there's a whole range of what that means. But we have students who are coming to us from refugee camps and who've never been to school at all, much less a school where they're supposed to speak English. And so we have students walking in our doors every morning who are walking in with challenges that kids in other school districts around us don't necessarily face. And I think that gives more purpose and meaning to our work in many ways. I think every student, every child ought to have the same opportunity to realize their potential and to be successful. And that's our job. Our job is making sure that every student who walks in our doors gets what they need to be successful. And the other reason I give for a teacher is we have a very compelling mission, but coupled with that very compelling mission, I think we're doing good stuff. I think we're ahead of the curve. I think when you think about our We Learn initiative, when we think about the kind of PD we're doing and what we're thinking about in terms of personalizing student-centered learning, I think, teachers are going to have opportunities to do kinds of teaching and learning that they didn't know they could do if they come to Springfield. And I think, we talked about computer science for all. I think we're ahead of the curve on making sure our students get computer science and computational thinking. I just think that teachers are going to have opportunities here through our one-to-one and through We Learn and through Unified Classroom to, do things maybe they didn't learn in ed school about being a coach and a facilitator of a student's learning as opposed to just being delivering the content from up front. And I think that's incredibly exciting. And I hope that prospective teachers also think so.
Well, as we are coming to near the end of our time, because we all have very busy days, one of the things that we're all curious about is what are some of the things that you are really looking forward to seeing in classrooms next year?
Well, certainly given the stuff we've talked about today, I'm excited to see Unified Classroom. I'm excited to see how teachers respond to it, how students respond to it. I have 2 teenagers in the district, and I can tell you they're not fans of Brightspace. So I'm curious to see how they respond to Unified Classroom. And so I'm excited for that. I am excited to see these digital textbooks in action. I'm excited that we expect to have many more schools sending laptops home. All of the feedback from students about taking laptops home has been positive. And I'm looking forward to that expanding and seeing what teachers and students can do together, what kind of work that teachers are assigning, how students are rising to the challenge. I think it's kind of a good time to be in the Springfield Public Schools in the sense that I think we are trying things that I think are good for kids. And I think there's going to be good stuff to see. And I don't think we're all the way there, and that's okay. I think different classrooms all our classrooms are going to look different next year. And some are going to be, way out in front using Unified Classroom. Some are still going to be using Brightspace, and some might not be using either. And that's okay, because I think we have time while we're trying to make this move. But I think the key is we have to keep moving towards, again, more personalized and student-centered learning where kids have choice. I think that I'm not sure it was ever a great thing for kids, but the days of, all kids doing the same thing all the time, I just don't think it works. I'm not sure it ever did, but it definitely doesn't work for our kids. And I think giving them opportunities to just more flexibility for them to express choice I don't know if this is next year, but I mean, when I think about We Learn and I think about what I want to see in the long term, I think my goal is that we get to a point where every kid, and I'm talking about 25,500 kids, every kid in the Springfield Public Schools is going home from school at least some days every week, saying to someone that they go home to, "You won't believe what I did today." And I think that's achievable. I think that our kids want to learn. We have to provide the opportunities for them to get excited about what they're learning, so that they have those conversations at home about, "Man, you won't believe what I did." And so I think that's really where we're trying to get to.
Well, that was our interview with Paul Foster. He is our boss. He is the Chief Information Officer in the district. A lot of decisions, whether it goes through the devices you use or the technology or the software that you use in the classroom, all starts in people sending Paul ideas and thoughts. And I think one of the great pullaways of that is we listen. We're not stuck into this is the way we're doing it. This is how we've done it for the last few years. Like, if something better comes along that makes sense for us at this time, we're going to make that shift.
Right. That's definitely a great takeaway, Mike. And it's one thing that I think every one of us needs to remember every single day, that technology is changing and improving exponentially as we go forward. And we're never going to have the time that we used to 25, 50 years ago to sit and digest every aspect of every piece of technology. It's going with the flow, learning new things, adapting, adjusting, and having that vision. That's what I loved about really everything that Paul said, is he has such a fantastic vision for the city of Springfield, and that's what makes it so exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, and just the couple of changes that we talked about in the interview, that Seeds, which I know when I was a teacher was a real pain because there was so many clicks and so many ways to things that you had to add and had to find everything, and you couldn't look at last year's while you're doing this year so that you can say, hey, I made growth here, I didn't make growth here. This whole new program will hopefully help us in that, make it a lot easier. And then with Unified Classroom, we, especially our department, is very excited because a lot of the things that people had as pain points for Brightspace and why they wouldn't use it are all gone with it, with Unified Classroom now. And even people who have brought in other software don't have to use that software like EdgeElastic, because everything that EdgeElastic has is in Unified Classroom, which is just a way to help eliminate the number of clicks and the number of ways to get information. And so I know I'm excited about that. So
very excited. And it just is a great reminder that no matter what the software is, no matter what the technology is that you're using, if you're not happy with some piece of it, in today's world, it's really just a matter of vocalizing those concerns. And I'm sure somebody out there has an improvement that we can put into place. So it's really a great time. I know a lot of people get frustrated with technology, but it really is the best time to be involved in education.
Well, that is it, Suzanne, for this season of SPS Digital Learning Hour podcast. So tune in for next year. I know that we've had a lot of fun doing this, and as over the summer, we'll tweak and make little twists and turns here to make this an even more enjoyable experience for you guys. But thank you for going on this ride with us for a complete season now.
Thank you very much. I can't wait for next year. I'm sure we're going to have so many more people involved in the podcast, Mike, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
So if you are a teacher out there and you're like, man, I would have been great for an interview, please reach out to us at DLA Support. We will do interviews over the summer so we can have it prepared for early on in the year. If we did an interview with you and you haven't heard it yet, you're probably one of the first ones lined up for next year's podcast because we ran out of time. It's been a crazy full year, and if you know of a teacher who should be interviewed, you should also contact us because we want to know all the great things that you guys are doing, because as you know, you're in your classroom with your students in your school, but you don't know what the school is doing 5 minutes down the road because you're not with them. And this is one way that we get to share all the amazing things that you as teachers are doing in this district. So thank you to those who we've interviewed this year. It's been a lot of fun to go out and visit your schools, and I hope to see you again soon. I'm Mike Thomas.
I'm Suzanne Zargis.
And we're signing off for the summer.